Welcome back. In this next dark story, we will be talking about the most haunted places in Virginia. Let's dive in and explore the dark history, demonic, supernatural, and chilling mysteries in the state. Don't forget to like, share, and please subscribe. Virginia does not become frightening after the sun goes down. Virginia is frightening because the darkness was already there. It is buried beneath colonial floorboards, sealed behind asylum doors, soaked into Civil War hospital grounds, and trapped inside grand hotels where the chandeliers still tremble long after the last guests have gone to sleep. This is a state where old brick mansions stand over forgotten suffering, where empty hallways carry voices that do not belong to the living, and where the dead are said to repeat the final moments they were never allowed to escape. Some of these stories are local legend, some are witness reports. Some come from staff members, visitors, and paranormal investigators who entered these places believing they were chasing ghosts and left convinced that something else was chasing them. Because in Virginia, the most disturbing hauntings are not always gentle spirits wandering through history. Sometimes the footsteps stop outside the door. Sometimes the voice knows your name. Sometimes the thing waiting in the darkness does not feel human enough to have ever been alive. We're going to start with the Peyton Randolph House in Williamsburg. The Peyton Randolph House stands in Colonial, Williamsburg, like a dark red wound that never closed. Portions of the home date to the early 18th century. And Peyton Randolph, a powerful Virginia statesman and president of the Continental Congress, lived there until his death in 1775. But the polished historical surface hides a much heavier truth. The Randolph property was also home to enslaved men, women, and children whose daily lives unfolded under the control of the family. Later generations brought their own tragedies into the house, and the property became associated with sickness, family loss, war, and death. During the Civil War era, wounded soldiers were reportedly brought through the building, adding another layer of pain to rooms that already seemed unable to release the past. Tour guides and local storytellers have long described the house as one of Williamsburg's most unsettling locations, not because of a single ghost, but because the entire structure feels crowded. People have reported footsteps crossing empty floors, doors closing without a hand touching them, voices murmuring from vacant rooms, and dark figures appearing where the hallways bend away from the light. The most frightening part of the Peyton Randolph House is the sense that the activity is aware of the people standing outside. Some visitors describe the feeling of being watched from upstairs windows, even when the building appears empty. Others speak of shadows moving behind the glass, a childlike figure near the grounds, and unseen hands that seem to brush against clothing or push the air from a person's chest. Local ghost tour lore tells of an encounter involving the Marquis de Lafayette, who is said to have felt an invisible force prevent him from entering. Whether that story is history or legend, it fits the house too well. The Peyton Randolph House does not feel like a place where one spirit wanders. It feels like a locked room packed with grief, where the dead are pressing against the walls from the inside. And when the house grows quiet, the silence is worse than the footsteps, because silence means that whatever was moving has stopped walking and is now standing still, listening to you breathe. Next is the St. Albans Sanatorium in Radford. St. Albans Sanatorium rises above Radford like a building that was never meant to survive daylight. It first opened in the late 19th century as a Lutheran boys' preparatory school, a place built around discipline, pressure, and rigid expectations. In 1916, the property became a psychiatric hospital. The institution began with promises of treatment and recovery. But its history became entangled with the darker reality of 20th century mental health care, overcrowding, isolation, electric shock procedures, primitive treatments, and patients whose suffering was too easily hidden behind locked doors. Today, the decaying corridors are open for historical tours, flashlight tours, and paranormal investigations. But people who walk into St. Albans often describe more than an abandoned hospital. They describe an atmosphere that seems to descend on the body. The air feels heavier. The hallways seem longer than they should be. The darkness appears to move at the edge of the flashlight beam. Visitors and investigators have reported disembodied whispers, sudden bangs, doors shifting on their hinges, shadow figures crossing stairwells, and the sound of crying or laughter echoing through rooms that have been empty for decades. Certain areas of St. Albans carry especially disturbing reputations. One room is known in local paranormal lore as the suicide bathroom, a place associated with hydrotherapy and overwhelming despair. Visitors have described cold touches, breath near the ear, and the sensation that someone is standing inches behind them in total darkness. Other rooms have earned names based on the activity reported inside them. A rocking chair that appears to move without explanation, whistles answering investigators from unseen corners, and boiler room shadows that seem too tall, too still, and too deliberate to be ordinary tricks of light. The horror of St. Albans is not that a single ghost might remain trapped there. The horror is the possibility that years of suffering created something larger than anyone's spirit, something made from fear, loneliness, and voices that were ignored for too long. Investigators enter asking the dead to speak. But the most terrifying question is whether the thing that answers is one of the dead at all. Get ready for the Exchange Hotel Civil War Medical Museum in Gordonsville. The Exchange Hotel in Gordonsville was built in 1860 as a place of comfort for railroad travelers. Its grand veranda, high-ceiling parlors, and elegant rooms welcome passengers moving between rail lines. Then the Civil War arrived, and the hotel became part of the Gordonsville Receiving Hospital. The trains no longer carried tourists looking for a meal or a clean bed. They carried wounded soldiers by the thousands. More than 70,000 men were treated through the hospital system, and hundreds were buried on the surrounding grounds. The building became a place of triage, surgery, exhaustion, infection, and death. Staff worked while cries rose from the wards and the front lawn filled with injured soldiers waiting to learn whether they would be treated, transferred, or left to die. Today, the restored hotel serves as a museum. Its rooms display artifacts from the war. But according to staff reports and visitor accounts, the building sometimes appears to replay sounds from the suffering it witnessed. Footsteps crossing empty floors, doors shutting by themselves, cold spots forming without warning, and heavy objects scraping across the floor before dropping with a violent thud in an empty room. The haunting reports at the Exchange Hotel are detailed enough to feel less like campfire stories and more like fragments from a place that never fully returned to the present. Former staff members have described apparitions in period clothing and employees who refuse to enter the summer kitchen after dark. One recurring figure is said to be Anna, a cook associated with the hotel's kitchen building. Visitors have reported seeing a woman moving between the kitchen and the main house, while investigators claim to have captured a voice answering questions about what she was cooking. Others report figures dressed as nurses moving up the stairs and from room to room as though they are still checking patients who died more than a century ago. In one story, visitors spoke for several minutes with a man seated on the edge of a hospital cot, only to discover that no reenactor or employee had been upstairs with them. Another account describes barefoot, child-sized prints appearing in freshly mopped water. The Exchange Hotel is terrifying because its ghosts do not simply appear and disappear. They continue working. They continue walking. They continue waiting beside beds that no longer hold the wounded. And somewhere in the darkness, something heavy is still being dragged across the floor.
Next, the Cavalier Hotel in Virginia Beach. The Cavalier Hotel does not look like a haunted place. It rises above Virginia Beach with old-world elegance, polished floors, sweeping staircases, and the faded glamour of a resort built for wealthy guests, celebrities, musicians, and politicians. Opened in 1927, the hotel became known as the Grand Dame of the Shore. But its most famous ghost story began only 2 years later. In June 1929, Adolph Kurs fell to his death from the 6th floor under circumstances that remain the subject of speculation. Since then, the 6th floor has become the center of the hotel's darkest reports. Guests and staff have described cold spots, windows opening without explanation, whispering voices, the apparition of a man wandering the corridor, and even the sickening sound of an impact outside the building when no one is there. During renovations in 2016 and 2017, the front desk reportedly received phone calls from the 6th floor while the area was closed and unoccupied. Imagine answering a hotel phone after midnight, hearing only static and distant breathing, and realizing that the call is coming from a room where nobody has checked in. The Cavalier's other reported spirits are quieter, but no less disturbing. A spectral bellhop has been seen near the stairs between the 5th and 6th floors, warning guests away before vanishing. A woman in white has reportedly appeared in 3rd floor hallways. And at the foot of a bed, staff and visitors describe the scent of cigar smoke, drifting through a hotel that has been non-smoking since its reopening, along with faint jazz-age music and piano notes sounding from rooms where no one is playing. Local lore also speaks of a ghostly cat and a young girl searching the halls, their story tied to a tragic accident near the pool. But the Cavalier's most frightening activity remains the phone. A telephone is ordinary, safe, familiar, until it rings in the middle of the night, until the caller ID shows an empty sixth-floor room, until you answer and hear a voice buried under static whisper a room number, pause for several seconds, and ask why you are sleeping in its bed.
And finally, the Bacon's Castle in Surrey. Bacon's Castle is older than most of the ghost stories told about it. Built in 1665 for Arthur Allen and his family, the massive brick residence is one of the oldest surviving brick dwellings in North America. During Bacon's rebellion in 1676, followers of Nathaniel Bacon occupied the home for months, transforming the private estate into a fortified stronghold. The house has survived centuries of conflict, forced labor, family grief, death, and change. Its grounds include surviving outbuildings connected to the lives of enslaved and free African Americans who lived and worked on the property. By daylight, Bacon's Castle is an architectural treasure. At night, its tall chimneys, narrow windows, and stair tower look less like a preserved home and more like a warning. Local legend speaks of footsteps inside empty rooms, disembodied voices, doors opening on their own, furniture shifting when no one is inside, and the apparition of a woman in a white dress standing in the yard or high on the stair tower, watching the property as though she is waiting for someone who never returned. But the most famous story connected to Bacon's Castle is not a human figure. It is the ghost light. For generations, witnesses have described a glowing fireball moving from the ruins of Lawns Creek Church across the dark fields toward the castle grounds. According to local tradition, the light drifts through the night, wanders near the house, and eventually returns toward the church ruins before disappearing. Some versions describe it racing near the stair tower and passing through the area of a doorway that was sealed long ago. No one knows what the light is supposed to be. A spirit, a warning, a memory of violence, or something older that never belonged to the house at all. The woman in white is frightening because she resembles a person. The fireball is worse because it does not. It has no face, no voice, no footsteps. It does not need to knock. It simply crosses the field like a living ember, moves toward the dark brick walls, and enters a house that has been waiting for it for more than 300 years. Thank you for your continued support. Please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps motivate us to keep bringing you more true haunted stories, terrifying legends, and chilling paranormal mysteries.